Okay, we are back. And just so you know, those songs were chosen for a reason. If you all know Clayton, he loved himself some Beatles and he loved himself some Stevie Ray Vaughan. So I thought, what perfect songs to use to represent some of the many artists that he truly loved. Guitars was Clayton's thing, and so Stevie Ray Vaughan was definitely a master at that. So that's why those songs were chosen. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Amazing first half. We got another spectacular second half to go, and I couldn't think of anybody better to get us started than a true marketing hero in many ways, a marketing expert, marketing guru. I have known this person probably for about 30 years. 30 years seems to be a big number, same number going around and around. We all kind of started at the same time. Well, while I was at Phillips, this person was at Boardroom, doing his miraculous things with growing that business with Marty Edelson. So I want to let him come on and share his vast knowledge, a truly wonderful person. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Kurtz.
Thank you, Carline. Everybody can hear me? Yes. First of all, thank you for letting the Copywriter Wanna-be crash the party. Now, I'm not saying that in a self-deprecating way. I'm saying that because some of my best friends are some of my best friends are copywriters, because I'm not stupid. I'm a list guy. I'm a list guy through and through. But without the great copy to go with all the list research that I do, I got nothing. And Clayton was one of the quintessential stars of my career. And more importantly, and I'm looking for Wendy, but Wendy, I love you. I love Clayton. You know how much I just adore both of you. And if I keep going, I'm going to choke up. So I'm going to go on to what I'm going to give you as my lessons. So I've got four lessons that I got from Clayton, and I'll do them in order of not in importance, because they're all equally important. First, Clayton Makepeace as a professor. If you wanted someone to regale you, dancing on the stage a la Tony Robbins or to loud music, Clayton wasn't your speaker, but that's fine with me. Clayton always sat at a podium or at a desk, old school, but there was nothing old school in what he was teaching. Pure gold all the time, always with concrete examples of winners, never just the theory. And the interesting thing was that Clayton used examples of his own packages, but also other packages from his competitors, and I use that term loosely because we're all in this as coexistence. And he didn't just study the competition, the competitors were his professors. And so the professor was always teaching from his own wisdom, but also from the wisdom of everyone he touched. Now, that's a brilliant and expansive way to teach, if you ask me. And since I consider myself a teacher of the stuff that I teach, not copy, but other marketing stuff, I emulated him so much in the way he taught by really emphasizing everybody else as much as himself. And I hope I can be as good a teacher as him for the rest of my career. So he really taught me how to teach. That was my first lesson. My second lesson is Clayton was a triple threat. A lot of things that have been discussed today were all about, Clayton was not a copywriter who wrote for food. He knew lists, he knew offers, he knew everything about direct marketing. And all the A-list copywriters know what I'm talking about, because you can't be an A-list copywriter without being a triple threat: copy, offer, list. So Clayton, within the 7 characteristics that I identified that every great A-list copywriter has, and all the people who've spoken today and the ones that are going to speak later who are A-list copywriters know what I'm talking about. There's 7 characteristics. Clayton was hungry. He knew how to show and not tell with the best words for his audience he was writing for at all times. And we used to have multiple controls in direct mail. You know how tough that is to do to different audiences? Whereas in email, we know it's easy. We did it the hard way. And that's because Clayton wanted to write specific copy to specific audiences, message to list. He had insatiable curiosity, never settling for anything superficial in his research, which showed up in his writing. More on that in a minute. He knew how to seek and access feedback loops for his copy and research. It didn't matter that he was a master. He knew every piece of copy could always be improved upon, and he sought out other masters to support him. That's a true master. He had supreme passion for whatever topic he was writing about. And if he didn't, he would get some through total immersion in the topic, or then he would just pass on the project if he couldn't get passion. That's the test of an amazing copywriter. He understood direct marketing principles beyond just copy, as I said. Never simply wrote for food. He read Hopkins to Sugarman to Schwartz to Halbert to Ogilvy to Abraham to Cialdini to Kennedy. Every copywriter, any copywriter or marketer who had anything meaningful to teach, Clayton would learn from them. And I can't remember a training or presentation that didn't come from Clayton that didn't come with an extensive recommended reading list, and not just on copywriting either. And he had humility. He lived confidence without arrogance, which is rare and the real test of being a master. And he has a body of work that will stand the test of time, way more than just swipes. And Clayton was also an innovator and a pioneer at the same time. I tell this story, but I think it's instructive every time I tell it. He didn't invent the Magalog. Gary Bencivenga, Jim Rutz did, I guess. He didn't invent fascinations or bullets, as Paris talked about, but he combined them into our first winning Magalog control in a way that no one else could up to that point. I was having tremendous FOMO because I had Phillips envy in the day, I had Agora envy in the day, and I wanted a Magalog of my very own. And we did the Magalog. It was a perfect format for our products and services because we had an unknown brand and it could tell a long story in it. Had 2 or 3 copywriters, couldn't nail it. Clayton was the first one that nailed it. How did he nail it? A lot of the things that Paris spoke about, a cover of a Magalog that directed you to a page number inside the Magalog, multiple entry points. Then in the Magalog, you give away some steak. It's not all sizzle. My whole first part of my career was all sizzle, no steak. It was all just fascinations or bullet points, and then you got to get the product or the book or the newsletter to get the answers. Well, a Magalog's 32 pages sometimes. You can give away some answers, but you don't give away the whole answer. So Clayton was a master at doing that, and I think it's a technique that a lot of people use today. They don't know where it originated. I tell you where it originated. So Clayton was such a master at that, and it caused me to no longer have fear of missing out on having a control Magalog, and I didn't have FOLP as opposed to FOMO, which is fear of lost profits either. So I think I think I'm about at 7 minutes, so I'm not even gonna do the 4th one. It's too long and involved, but just Clayton, I like Paris, I could go on for hours, and that's why I always had him at my mastermind groups. See, I had my timer on because I know you'd cut me off, Carline, because I get diarrhea of the mouth. I would just go on forever talking about Clayton, but I wanted to get a bunch of stuff in. Just a privilege to be here on this stage, and I miss him terribly. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. A point that you brought out that I thought was awesome was that, especially for copywriters, we have to remember, especially in the direct response space, we cannot just be a copywriter. You can't just say, oh, I just write copy, it's all I do. You have to understand direct marketing principles. That's what Brian was saying. He's excellent. He's an excellent example of, of understanding and putting direct marketing principles to work. We can't just be in this bubble going, I'm just going to write the copy, because you got to know, who are you writing it to? Who is it going to? Who are these people? So you know what pressure points to push. So all of those, you got to know, what is the offer? What are we going to give to them? So all of those things are very much important parts of the whole copy puzzle. So Brian, one thing I wanted to ask you, because you didn't bring it out, was you talk about the little formula about, I don't always agree with you on this formula, but for sake of being cool and nice and whatever, I'm going to say you're right. But tell me about your number, the breakdown you have for your formula.
Right. So, and also it's like, doing the list work. I'm not saying it's easy. I was really good at it, but if I could do that, I could never write the copy that I'm talking about. I'm talking about Clayton Makepeace copy, Gary Bencivenga copy, David Deutsch copy, Kim Krause copy. All of these people are just the best of the best. So I always say that the 40-40-20 rule, which was 40%. It says that the success of a direct marketing campaign depends 40% on the list, 40% on the offer, and 20% on the creative, does not mean that the creative is half as important. It's actually the creative is the least important until it's not. And so what you need to get the list dialed in more importantly than anything else. So I call it the 41-39-20 rule, with lists being 41%, get the lists right, get the offer right. Now, when you have a guy like Clayton working for you, he's going to do the offer with his copy. So I got 2 of the 3 with him. Yeah. I'm going to give him a list that's going to be so targeted and so segmented for the product that we've been working on together, that once he writes the copy, I'm not saying the copywriting be easy, it'd be easy for him. Copywriting is not a commodity, believe me. And so that was always my premise, that I had these secret weapons, but I was going to set it up for them for success, and they went beyond anything imaginable. I mean, if I told you the numbers, I didn't get to the Magalog that Clayton did for us, but it mailed 16 million pieces. It launched, decades of winning Magalogs based on that. Gary, I'm looking at Gary. It's like he made a little money with us, as did David Deutsch, as did Paris Lampropoulos, as did Kim. It's just, but I think that, when you have a copywriter like Clayton in your court, and then they became my best friends. I mean, I got to tell you, lack of a better term, I think David Deutsch and Paris Lampropoulos, they're not my best friends in the business. They're my best friends. So being a best friend with a list guy, I mean, they had to stoop down, but, thank goodness they did. I mean, God bless them. God bless them.
Thank you, Brian. Just a clarification. So people say, what is list? When we talk about the list, we're talking about the names of people who are going to receive the promotions. So there's a list of names.
I realize we have 1,100 people on this call. It's like, I didn't know what I had to find.
Yeah, just okay. And hey, you know what?
It's the media. It could be the media. It could be a Facebook list. It could be an email list, right? Yeah.
It's whoever you're targeting. That's your quote list. We go old school by saying list. That's what we go back in our direct response days. But it's whoever your target market is. That is what we.
But remember, lists are people too. So it's not okay, names on a piece of paper.
We're gonna cut you off. Just for the bad joke. All right. Thank you very much again, Brian. Really appreciate that. So next we're going to talk to someone who is, without a doubt, the pioneer in political direct mail, and also one of Clayton's very, very good friends, Mr. Richard Viguerie.
Thank you, Carline. What a wonderful tribute that was to Clayton. To be honest with you, it was bittersweet. I really had a hard time watching it. I so miss that guy. Cindy talked about how a lot of Phillip alumni here, but like you knew your daughter before anybody else, I knew Tom Phillips before anybody else. He was a sophomore at Dartmouth, invited me to come to speak to his young conservative group at Dartmouth, which I did, became fast friends. In mid-70s, he asked me for a job. I kept putting him off, saying, I don't have something right now, Tom. One day he literally showed up uninvited in my office with a new wife, new bride, and I said something to the effect, Tom, go down the hall, there's an empty office, I'll catch up with you later. Over the next few years, we started a couple of newsletters, and he came in one day and said he wanted to leave. I said, sorry to see you go, Tom, but he said one of the newsletters. I said, take them with you. I didn't want any newsletters. I didn't know what the value of them. So anyway, if I had a sense God gave most people, I'd say, sure, Tom, just 10%, just 10%. So we lost another giant from Phillips back in those days, David Franke last year, who probably more than anybody else was responsible for getting Tom into the health newsletters, and he was just a giant marketer as well. When I met Clayton, I was 80 years old, 87 now, and so he didn't change my life, but he and Wendy greatly enhanced, enriched my life, and it was just wonderful, great 7 years. Again, thank you, Carline, and all of those who've helped put this together. Marcella, daughter number 2, this wonderful tribute for a legend, a giant of a direct marketer, and who just happened to be a dear, dear friend to all of us speakers today. Clayton was so exceptional in so many ways. I don't think anybody's touched on this yet, but a lot of attributes have been attributed to Clayton. But remember, he was at the top of his game, world-class postal marketer. And then on a dime, he switches and becomes, for 20-plus more years, a world-class digital marketer. I don't know anybody else that's done that. It's just incredible. So anyway, I suspect, Brian, you were talking about what a good friend, maybe one of your best friends. I suspect that there are 50 people that would say, swear on a stack of Bibles, I was one of Clayton Makepeace's 2 or 3 best friends, which says a whole lot about how he treated people. He just made you feel so very, very special. Clayton knew me long before I knew him. At the age about 16, Clayton is working for a client of mine in Tulsa, and he's running at night the printing press and inserting machines. And so 2 or 3 times a year I'd visit the client, and the day before I would arrive, Clayton be told, hey, shape up the place, get it looking real nice. Viguerie's going to be here tomorrow. Okay. And so anyway, he saw me. I never remember seeing him as late, maybe 1969, 1970s. And during those long, boring nights when the machines are whirling away, he begins to read my copy. And he had this thought to himself, hey, I can do this. So all you copywriters out there who read your copy, edited your copy, long before that, he was reading my copy and felt he could outperform me, and he probably could have. For the next 45 years after that, when he was 16, we had occasion later years to come in contact, not a lot. But I remember I was in the late 80s visiting my Cajun family friends, relatives down in South Louisiana. And Clayton, knowing I was coming, invited me to meet him at the Blanchard office, which I did. He thought maybe there was some business we could do. And he met me in the lobby. And so we're going up the elevator. And I said, Clayton, how do you like New Orleans? And he said, oh, it's great. I just, love the people, the food, everything. The music is so great. If only we could teach these Cajuns to read and write, he said. I didn't say anything. About 3 or 4 seconds, I said, Clayton, I'm 100% Cajun. I never saw Clayton in such a loss for words. But anyway, we went on having a little contact now and then, but the really reconnection that I had with Clayton was thanks to Brian Kurtz in Miami, Rooftop Hotel, reception and dinner. And I'd say that was about, I don't know, maybe 2015, something like that. And it was just love at first sight. It was just, it was like we had never been apart there. And so our relationship just immediately blossomed and became exceptionally close. After we reconnected there on that rooftop at Brian's Mastermind, he and Wendy began to come to my home out in the country, maybe 2, 3 times a year. And it's been 4-day weekends. And usually we were joined by my son Ryan, Amanda Dobson, sometimes Perry Belcher, Kathleen and Mark from my office. I remember the first time that he came to my home, stopped at my office, and Kathleen, our present CEO, arranged for about 20 of our creative people to gather in a conference room. And so Clayton waxed long and eloquently for well over an hour about his life as a marketer. Remember one of our executives, Ben Hart, said, I really want to know about the history of your name, your last name. And so Clayton loved to talk about the history of Makepeace, where it came from, etc. So I was talking to Kathleen yesterday, and she reminded me that in that hour in my conference room, he talked about, Bob Stone and John Caples and his checklist, how every piece in a postal mailing had to have a purpose. It had to be a reason it was in the mailing. There were many, there's an old saying about opposites attract. It didn't work for Clayton and me. We shared so much. That we shared. I can't think of anything we really didn't almost share together. We shared our Christian faith. His father was a preacher. When I would go to Mass on Sunday morning, 8:30 Mass out in the country, Clayton and Wendy were always there with me. That was really what he wanted. We shared a deep love of marketing, especially direct marketing. He read and reread the classics, Hopkins, Ogilvy, Stone, Caples, Benson, Swartz, Reese and Trout, Cialdini. We shared a friendship with so many people in marketing, many on this Zoom call. We shared a work ethic. He was up at 4:30 most every morning. I've heard Clayton, as perhaps some of y'all have, say numerous times about how when he was working in California, getting started, he would get up at 4 and 4:30 and right till noon. And the reason he did that, because at noon, that's when the girls came to the beach, and he wanted to be free the rest of the day. So he kept that habit the rest of his life. Long weekends at my home, no matter how early I got up, I'd go into the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. Clayton was there with his coffee and writing. We shared a love of history, shared a love of reading, including fiction, nonfiction. We shared, of course, the same politics, shared a love of all things politically conservative, including philosophy, ideas, Fox TV. We shared a love of giving and learning and teaching and mentoring young aspiring marketers. Clayton enticed my son, who has an international English teaching marketing business, to leave Prague and join him at Agora, where he mentored my son. We share a love of trivia. We love to talk about movies. Our very favorite of all the movies we talk about, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And whenever he would come to my home, many times during that long weekend, we would try to come up with a new saying that we hadn't said before about from the movie there. Without question, our very favorite was George Clooney is surrounded by the feds. The police are everywhere. He's in a hay barn. And he says, "Darn, we're in a tight fix. Darn, we're in a tight spot." And the reason, if you've seen that movie, you know it. And Carline asked us to keep it G-rated, so I just did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that part.
Darn, we're in a tight spot.
Richard,
I'll never say that without thinking of Clayton.
Richard. Hey, Richard, this was thank you, Richard. This was great. I'm sorry. You know what? We could spend an hour just listening to your stories. They were amazing. And I remember, especially what you just said about Clayton and his work schedule, 4 a.m. so he can get out to the beach by noon to see the girls. Now I know why he worked that early. Thank you for explaining it to me. We have to keep moving on, but thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories. I want to talk about someone else I think is also very special. This woman is amazing. She is such a giver. She is an amazing copywriter. She's an amazing copy mentor, copy chief, copy mama, and all that, and a bag of potato chips and all. And she has a great Titanides group that she helps with mentoring, especially women in business, women copywriters. So please welcome my dear friend, Marcella Allison.
Thank you. Thank you, Carline, for having me here. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the chance to share my story. So who was Clayton to me? Well, every time I was at AWAI, Denise, the lovely Denise, talked about Clayton being at AWAI or one of Clayton's many copywriting workshops. Clayton would introduce me as his copywriting granddaughter, because my copywriting mentor was Paris Lampropoulos, who you heard from earlier. And Paris's copywriting mentor was Clayton. And I always wondered how Wendy felt about that, since we're about the same age, and suddenly Clayton's like, and Marcella's my granddaughter. So this is why when I first began to make a name for myself as a copywriter, I always give credit to Clayton for the amazing inheritance I received from Paris. And that includes the very simple lesson I'm going to share with you today. It is deceptively simple, but it has been one of the most powerful of my career. And I mean that. And Paris hinted at it, but he didn't quite go into it. So I'm glad, so he didn't steal my thunder. Now, not only have I relied on the secret to improve my own copywriting, but it is a secret that has helped me to earn my reputation as a great teacher and has allowed me to speak on stages and even teach my own copywriting courses. It's the thing that I have become known for, and that would not have happened if it had not been for Clayton and Paris. Now, this is how I remember the story, and since Paris has already spoken, he can't correct me. So Paris once told me that when he was first working with Clayton as an apprentice, before he became the brilliant mentor we all know and love today, that sometimes when he would turn his copy in, Clayton would simply rewrite it. You're shocked, I know. And this happened to me when I worked with Clayton on multiple projects for Wise Research. Clayton would simply rewrite my opening, or maybe he'd rework a whole section. Now, he wouldn't do it on the first shot out of the gate. He'd give me a couple of rounds of feedback, let me do my best to improve the copy. But eventually, when the copy needed to be turned in and it needed that one more level of genius, right? Clayton would sometimes just take it and rework a whole section. Now, if you are an apprentice or you're working with a great copy chief or a client who might also happen to be a great copywriter, I'm going to go out on a limb and guarantee that this is going to happen to you. And if you are a bad or a mediocre copywriter, then when this happens, you're going to get your panties all up in a twist. You're going to get all offended. You're going to complain that this copy chief destroyed your brilliant copy. But if you are an A-list copywriter and a brilliant student like Paris was, you don't do that. Instead, you see this as one of the greatest gifts of your career, because almost no one will show you how to take mediocre copy and turn it into A-level copy, line by line, sentence by sentence. And that is exactly what Clayton did when he rewrote my copy. Now, when Paris worked with Clayton, it was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, as Brian Kurtz likes to joke, before Microsoft Word had all these fancy track changes features. So Paris would actually print out his original, print out Clayton's revised copy, put them side by side on the desk, and then literally go line by line and note the changes. Then he would ask himself the all-important question, why? Why did Clayton make that change? Now, sometimes the answer was obvious. In that case, Paris would simply note it in the margin. But if he didn't understand the reason why, then Paris would circle the change. He would go back to Clayton and ask. Then Clayton, being the great teacher that Clayton was, would explain the reason or the thinking behind the change, and Paris would make a note of it. So from the moment that Paris shared that story with me, I took that lesson to heart. And one day, when I was finally lucky enough to have Clayton review my copy, I used Microsoft Word, compare documents, to compare Clayton's version to mine. Then I made a note of all the most obvious reasons I could find, like, holy mackerel, that copy was so boring. I fell asleep and I wrote it. No wonder he rewrote it. But then sometimes I'd find a change and I couldn't figure out why he changed that. Like, why'd you delete that sentence, or why'd you move that to the back, right? I would circle those, I would go back and I would ask Clayton, and then I would write his answers down. And I would actually use the notes feature, right? And I would put in a note and highlight the change. Now, if I could share my screen right now, I would show you one of Clayton's before and afters. And Carline, my dear, you would be so happy because it would be covered in red in honor of Clayton. That copy would look like a murder scene. These, no, I'm not kidding. You know this, right? Like when you had the and the and, that's about how that went, right? So these before and after documents with all my notes about all the changes and the reason why have become my own personal copywriting Bible. Another one of my mentors, David Deutsch, once said, look, I don't mind when you make a mistake, but it's when you make the same one over and over again that it drives me crazy, right? So by creating track changes or a lesson learned document from all your projects, you stop making the same mistake, if only because eventually you get sick and tired of seeing it lit up in red every time. I want you to know, I want everyone on this call to know, I have, hand to God, every marked up version of every draft from every copy chief I have ever worked up on this little laptop, including Paris Lampropoulos, David Deutsch, Mark Ford, Mike Ward, and of course, my copywriting grandfather, Clayton Makepeace. Every before and after, every single one, everyone added to my education and became a stepping stone on my way to an A-list career. And when I finally became a copy chief myself, I began using this secret to train my mentees. And if you have ever seen me speak or train on copy on stage, then you know I always begin by showing you my crappy first draft, and then all the marked up versions, all the comments and changes from my copy chief, and then the final beautiful polished versions. And I explain all those lessons that I learned from the first version to the last, even if there's 17 versions in between. And in this way, Clayton's legacy to me becomes Clayton's legacy to the copywriters that I mentor. And the things that I wrote in the margin that I learned from Clayton become the lessons that I now get to share with the next generation of copywriters. So I guess I can call all of you Clayton's great grandchildren. So every time a client or a copy chief or even just a great reviewer, right, rewrites your copy, use the secret that I learned from Clayton and Paris. Sit down, study what they did, make a note of the lesson. If you don't understand, go back, ask the question, why did you change this? Build your own personal copywriting Bible. Do it in honor of Clayton. I promise you, it is worth its weight in gold. I want to thank Carline for letting me share my story, just a piece of it, and a huge hug to Wendy. And I have to close by saying, one of my favorite memories is listening to Clayton tell your love story over dinner. And I always said, there is nothing so attractive as a man who is so in love with his wife. And Clayton was surely in love with you.
Thank you so much, Marcella. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. My big takeaway from your session, which you wanted them to get, was why the change? You know, so it's as a writer, you love your copy. You see a copy chief come in, and it's pretty much like you said, a blood scene happening. Somebody said that's why it's called killer copy, because it's like, oh my goodness, they've destroyed your copy. But if you want to get better at your copywriting skill, go back and look and see why was the change made. Most of the time you'll see it. It's because your copy sucked and they made it better. But sometimes you won't see it. And so mark it up and go back and ask your copy chief, and go, why this change? I don't get what you're doing here. Explain to me. Not confrontational, but just out of, with the purpose of trying to learn what's going on. So that's a huge takeaway for writers, because you will get crits. And I love the other line you said about, the one more level of genius. You want your copy chief to bring you that one more level of genius. We're all on the same team. The client wants you to succeed. Your copy chief wants you to succeed. So don't look at it as an attack. My comments always, your copy sucks, you don't. So just remember that, and just take it, because the more you get for the crits, the more crits you get, the better you're going to be as a writer. So Marcella, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate those gems. Thank you. Gem that you gave. Appreciate it.
Thank you.